Goosebumps, the scariest series in children's literature. I've taken it upon myself to summarize every Goosebumps story ever told, in the hopes that we all come out knowing a bit more about the things that go bump in the night. Not just the stories, but their adaptations too. So if you're ready, viewer beware, you're in for a scare, as we dive into book number 4. Say cheese and die! So first up, of course, is the classic 1992 cover. It's actually the last cover to come out in 1992. A wonderful commenter has corrected me that Tim Jacobus is actually Tim Jacobus. Before starting this series, I just assumed this was correct. I didn't even think to check interviews or anything because I'm an idiot. So I'm grateful for the correction, and let's actually talk about the cover. This one is a classic, a family barbecue with creepy skeletons. To be honest, this cover and Night of the Living Dummy used to scare the hell out of me. I remember they used to sit on my bookshelf upstairs and I would walk by them and I would be too scared to even look at them. Now at the ripe old age of 23, the comedic side of the cover is a lot more apparent. A skeleton dad flipping burgers on the grill is badass. Our tagline here is, a picture is worth 1,000 screams instead of words. Our back tagline is, every picture tells a story. Not so threatening for that one. Our next cover is of course the 2003 reprint. It might look a little shiny because this was actually a library book that got laminated. I mean, at least I think. I didn't have this forever. The classic red slime is now blue, and our title is orange. Pretty good contrast. Now, our last standalone print is the 2009 classic Goosebumps print with Brandon Dorman's illustration. It's got a most likely dead person next to the evil camera from the story, and there's a spooky skull inside of the lens. Scary! The lens also looks broken, which doesn't really make any sense, and you'll see why when we get to the summary. You may notice the bonus features are here again, like I mentioned for Monster Blood. Those splat stats are also included, but I think I'll mention them after the summary. For our first collection, it's the Monster Edition number 1 again. It skipped over Monster Blood, but this is now the last time we'll see it. But say hello to the Vanishing Collection from 2004. Just like the hair-raising collection from before, the Vanishing Collection covers the next 3 books in the series. But unlike the hair-raising collection, it doesn't keep the cover of the first book listed, Say Cheese and Die, but instead has the cover for Let's Get Invisible, which is going to be 2 episodes from now. Well, that's it for the covers, so let's move on to the book summary. It's a fall afternoon in our fictional town of Pitt's Landing as our group of 4 friends, Greg, Michael, Doug, and Sherry, try to find something to do. Their favorite saying is, Pitt's Landing is the pits, because this town is so damn boring. Doug will be referred to as Bird from now on, an uncomfortably rude nickname because his messy hair and crooked nose make him look like a bird. The group thinks about heading to the comic shop, but they're broke. How about playing some baseball? With only 4 people? Well, how about Dairy Freeze, the totally not copyrighted ice cream shop where Greg's brother Terry works? Oh yeah, they're broke. Well, it seems like the only option left is to go on a walk. A Cocker Spaniel randomly appears from the neighbor's hedge, which Sherry pets before it runs back. Maybe this one will be replaced by a Border Collie in the episode too. Eventually the group ends up at our place of interest, an abandoned home that the whole town calls the Kaufman House. You could probably think of another few horror stories with this kind of plot, but before you can trespass, a shadowy figure attacks Greg! Oh, it's just that dog from earlier. Greg doesn't want to look like a scaredy cat, but he's the only one who doesn't want to go in this house. And so begins the relentless peer pressure from a group of young friends. Bird does a chicken dance to mock Greg, which gets Greg to laugh. Bird is so funny! Greg, still being sensible, mentions Spidey, a middle-aged, supposedly homeless guy that people in towns always see around the Kaufman House. They call him Spidey because he wears a black coat. Okay, well, who cares about him? We're going in. Inside is some haphazard old furniture. The carpet in the center of the room has a dark stain on it. They think it might be blood, but I guess that isn't cool or important enough to mention again. After spotting some rats and hearing the cracks of an old house, they wonder where Bird went. Probably the basement. But by the time they think of that, Bird's voice screams from the bottom, "It's got me!" Would you believe me if I said Bird was just goofing around? Greg sprints downstairs out of pure fear and concern, but Bird is just sitting down and laughing. Sherry gets so annoyed that she calls him Doug again, and mentions the boy who cried wolf. What if he's really in trouble and they ignore it? Perhaps some foreshadowing? The basement's pretty well lit due to some windows, and has a mattress, table, and plenty of food waste on the ground. The group assumes Spidey must live here, and all these Hungry Man meals on the ground, he must eat them frozen. Ew. Sherry finds a nasty old fur coat in a nearby wardrobe and just puts it on. Bird and Michael join her in putting a bunch of old clothes on for fun. What the hell's wrong with these kids? Somehow, Greg's only concern is that someone might own those clothes, so he walks over to a work table across the room. He notices a clamp and starts turning the knob to release it. What for? Who cares? Turning it reveals a hidden door containing a shelf, and what's sitting on it? A camera. Greg easily manages to grab the camera and the door snaps shut. We then get nearly an entire page describing how much Greg loves cameras, his dreams to travel the world to take beautiful photos, and the fact that he's been saving up for a new one because his automatic camera at home sucks. Oh my goodness. Anyway, the camera's large but still surprisingly heavy, with a long shutter. Pretty normal looking, especially if you're familiar with the one from the TV show. Greg decides to give it a try and lets Michael pose on the stairs. The camera can automatically develop too, but before it's done, the railing shatters and Michael crashes onto the concrete, most likely breaking his ankle. But oh no, footsteps above them. They're gonna get caught! Where do they go? Greg mentions another staircase hidden behind the furnace. It's their only chance. They all help Michael move and reach a set of double doors that they pray aren't locked. Greg gives them a push and they don't budge. Well, why not just try again? With Bird's help this time, him and Greg manage to push the doors open, taking the camera and heading out to the backyard. Michael's ankles feel a little better, and they manage to make it around to the front yard again. The group notices Spidey just staring at them from the window, and they all run to Michael's house. Michael's ankle feels a lot better, and Bird jokes that it's thanks to his extra padding. I'll mention it now that in Chapter 1, Michael was described as being not fat, but also not what people would call skinny. So, normal? Anyway, the kids take some time to talk about Spidey, going between either being too scared to ever go back there or being brave with the threat of being able to call the police on him for squatting. Wait, what about that awesome photo of Michael they took? Did it ever develop? The group huddles around to look at it and, oh my god! It doesn't make any sense. The photo shows Michael in midair after falling off the staircase. They took the photo before that happened, though. Weird! Well, Greg's gotta head home. He promised to do some chores and he's late. What's that in the driveway? Whoa! Dad's new 1992 Ford Taurus navy blue station wagon. I don't know anything about cars, but this one looks pretty ugly. Greg takes an uncomfortably long time sniffing the fresh car smell and decides he should take a photo to always remember how new this car is. Greg's mom calls him inside and he decides that since this camera is practically stolen property, he's got to make sure the parents don't find it. He stashes it away in his own hidden cabinet compartment and wonders where he put that photo. It's just sitting on the bed, so Greg takes a look at it and... oh my god! Yes, 2 chapters in a row doing the cliffhanger for the photo reveal. Well, again, the photo just isn't right. The car's completely totaled. Mom calls Greg down and he makes sure to glance at the new car. It's still perfectly fine. Dad then says after dinner, we're all gonna take a ride in the new car! Not much happens in this one. Family dinner conversations are happening as Greg's brother Terry mistakes the veal they're having for chicken. Greg tries to find any excuse not to go on a ride, but it doesn't work. He eventually comes to the conclusion that his fear from the photo was silly. And of course he'll go on a ride. This car has everything. A lot of room, cup holders. Well, that's it. So Dad pulls out onto the freeway and Terry tells him to put the pedal to the metal. Dad starts accelerating all the way up to 75. Mom's telling him to slow down. The speed limit's 55, but Dad won't listen. The sun's setting now and he's just starting to turn on his headlights. But where's that switch? Distracted by the dashboard, they swerve right towards an oncoming truck. Dad swerves back just in time and starts decelerating. He finally finds the headlights and wants to keep driving. Mom and Greg justifiably decide they should go home, and Terry's shaken from almost being killed. So, back in his room, Greg wonders what the deal is with that photo. Maybe he'll test the camera out again. He's gonna take a photo of himself in the mirror, but nah, the flash would ruin the photo. So he's gonna take a photo of Terry instead. Greg lies that Sherry lent him the camera and says he's testing if the thing even works. So without letting Terry see the photo, he goes back to his room and lets it develop. Instead of Terry's funny expression, he looks horrified, and he's standing in front of a house near the local playground. How strange. The camera must be busted, that's it. So on Tuesday, Greg and Sherry go to watch Bird's Little League game. Sherry wants to take a photo of Bird when he's up to bat, but Greg mentions how he thinks that the camera's broken. Bird comes up and asks when Greg will share the camera, because they were all in the basement together. Greg feels like since he found it, it should be his. A small fight between who gets to hold the camera ensues, and a picture of Bird accidentally gets taken. When the photo develops, Bird is sprawled out unconscious on the ground. Bird is called down to play, so Sherry and Greg find a shadier spot to look at the photo. It mentions his neck is bent, which sounds horrible, and I can only think of that one Jackass scene from Family Guy. They try to examine the camera to find out how much film is left, but there's no compartment of the sort. As the baseball game goes on, Sherry and Greg try to pry the camera open to figure out how any of it works, but they can't. As Sherry hands Greg the camera back in defeat, they spot Bird sprawled out on the ground, just like the photo! They run over to see if Bird is okay.
Gotcha.
Oh, another fake out. Bird is hilarious! The game is back on, and the Pitt's Landing Dolphins are terrible. They're losing 12-3 going into the third inning, and Bird can't catch a ball to save his life. Almost everyone's leaving, so Sherry suggests they leave too, but Craig wants to stay so he can boo Bird for one more inning. What an amazing group of friends we have here. Well, a batter from the opposing team hits the ball so hard it smashes into Bird's temple, causing him to cry out in pain before being sprawled on the ground, just like the photo. The photo came true! Everyone huddles around Bird except for Greg, who notices Terry running towards the playground. Why isn't he at work? And his expression. The photo came true! Terry tells Greg that they need to hurry. Dad was in an accident. The car's completely totaled. The photo came true! How insane! Greg takes a look back towards Bird and notices someone in the shadows of the bleachers, wearing all black. No time to confirm that obvious suspect. They gotta go home. We cut forward to the hospital and Greg is lost in his own mind. The realization of those photos predicting the future has him all messed up, but seeing Dad in this hospital room makes everything real. Dad has some broken bones, but he's pretty much okay. The car, not so much. Greg debates on telling his family about the photo, but when he finally decides to mention it to Dad, Mom gets angry and tells him to save it for later. Greg then decides that they wouldn't believe his story anyway. Probably true. As the painkillers put Dad to sleep, Mom explains to the kids what happened. Apparently, a guy ran a red light and smashed right into Dad's side of the car, and Dad's brakes just didn't work. Well, that sucks. Sounds like a potential lawsuit. Greg can't help but think about those photos actually happening. Can the camera predict the future, or does it actually make those accidents happen? On the phone with Sherry, Greg learns that Bird is completely fine. Also, Sherry's birthday party is coming up. She wants Greg to bring the camera, but he really thinks it's a bad idea. Sherry thinks Greg's a little baby for believing in that future prediction stuff, and then Greg tells her about a dream he had. He was at a family barbecue and he kept telling his family, "Say cheese," but his entire family were skeletons. This is clearly meant to reference the cover. Actually, this scene was hastily added to the book at Scholastic's request. They didn't think the cover really matched the story, so Stein needed to make it relevant. Even with that, the dream and the cover don't really match up. Greg's taking the photo, so he shouldn't be on the cover. Also, Terry is Greg's brother, so who's this girl? Maybe Jacobus thought Terry was a girl without any other context. It's pretty gender neutral of a name. The stream actually has a resemblance to the nightmare Amanda had in Welcome to Deadhouse. That one was a lot more terrifying, though. Well, anyway, Sherry thinks the dreams sound hilarious, and tells him to bring the camera anyway. Despite constant protesting, Sherry convinces Greg to bring it, and he heads to her birthday party, still regretting that decision. So Greg shows up and Bird and Michael are there. The funny thing is, it's mentioned that Michael's wearing a Hawaiian shirt that's way too big for him. It reminds me of something Gabriel Iglesias said.
Mine is simple. Why do I wear them? Because they fit.
Well, Sherry shows up and she wants her picture taken. Greg makes sure that this is definitely what she wants, and he finally takes the photo after she gets mad at him for hesitating. Sherry wants him to take a photo of everybody, and then they play a game. What game? One of the girls suggests Truth or Dare. Greg's nervous. 3 guys and 9 girls at a party playing Truth or Dare? That means kissing and stuff. Gross! Sherry mentions the photo, which breaks Greg out of this awkward funk. That's weird. Sherry's completely missing from the photo. She initially thinks Greg missed, but it's clearly the correct angle. Time to try again, but a bit closer this time. They take another and yep, she's still invisible. I guess the camera really is busted. So the group heads to a more private forest clearing near the backyard to play Truth or Dare. After 30 minutes of embarrassing agony, of which none is actually described, they need to go back inside to cut the birthday cake. Sherry's mom and the other kids joke around about letting them play in the woods, but hey, where's Sherry? Oh no, she's gone! So Greg is sitting by the tree while policemen cover the area around the house. Everyone's left already, so a local officer, Officer Riddick, asks why Greg is still there. He should probably just go home. They've made no progress in the search and might not for a long time. Greg knows the camera must have caused this, but he hesitates to tell Riddick. As an officer, he has the innate ability to know something's up with him, so he tells him that confessing whatever he's thinking about will help him feel better. So Greg fesses up and shows him the photos that the camera predicts the future, makes bad stuff happen, maybe, and wait, why is the officer staring so intensely at Greg? The officer gives Greg our most polite shoulder grab yet, a calming, front-facing hand resting on his shoulder to tell him, "You must be really frightened right now." He's gonna get an officer to drive him home and he should rest. Of course the cop wasn't gonna believe Greg, so Greg decides to walk himself home. As is a constant fear in the minds of children, and a trope that this series always has in it, is that adults never believe children. I guarantee it'll persist through the entire series. It's practically the cycle of human life at this point. Well, I mean, Greg could maybe just take a photo of something near the officer and prove what the camera can do, but whatever. So Greg returns home and nobody else is home, either at work or at the hospital. He goes to his room and, oh no, everything's a mess! Someone ransacked his room? But who? Someone who wanted the camera. Spidey! That creepy old hobo knows where Greg lives. Greg knows just what he has to do. Greg calls Bird and tells him to meet him at the baseball diamond, and he should call Michael too. He looks over to Sherry's house and sees the police are gone. The birthday cake is still sitting on the table untouched. Sherry must be alive. She has to be. Greg knows just what he has to do. Again. So Greg meets Bird and Michael at the playground and tells them the plan. He's going to return the camera back where he found it. The previously brave Bird and Michael are like, dude, no, we're not going to do that at all. Why not just throw it away or leave it here in the playground? Greg protests that Spidey will just come back and get it, which now I'm confused. I think his thought process is that if they hide it, Spidey will come ransack his room again thinking that Greg has it. That doesn't really make any sense though. Anyway, the kids begin fighting over the camera and Bird accidentally takes Greg's photo. The boys are interrupted when two big 9th grade kids appear. They're described in detail, but what really matters is that their names are Joey and Mickey, and they have a bit in common with the twin bullies from Monster Blood. Namely, their love for stealing people's bikes and wearing heavy metal t-shirts. Maybe that's just what kids did in the 90s. Anyone who lived in the early 90s, let me know if that's what you guys did. They snatch the camera from Greg and then take turns snatching it from each other. A bit of time is taken up by Greg telling him he needs to return it, and Joey wanting his picture taken. Greg can't let them learn the secret of the camera. Why not? Let these bullies get beat up or something. At the very least, they'll just think it's busted like Greg used to and just give it back. Well, Greg snatches the camera before anything happens and the three boys sprint away, not looking back until they cross the street. They weren't even being chased anyway. Mickey and Joey just laugh by the bleachers. After that encounter, it's too late to do anything now, so Bird and Michael go home for dinner. On the way home, Greg remembers that snapshot from earlier, and oh my god! Sherry's right there, in the photo! Greg and Sherry are standing side by side in the playground looking in fear as a huge shadow looms over them. He calls out to Sherry as if maybe she's just been invisible this whole time and...
Greg!
It's just Mom. 2 days later, Greg is pacing around his room completely lost. No leads on Sherry's disappearance, and he still doesn't think anyone would believe the truth about the camera. Michael and Bird still won't go to the Kaufman house with him, and Spidey hasn't even tried to invade his room. Greg takes the photos of Sherry and stews in anger with the hindsight that he never should have taken the camera. He doesn't even notice he starts ripping the photos apart. He lays down in shame for 2 hours until his phone rings. It's Sherry! She's just as surprised as he is. She's been home for the past 2 hours, and her mom won't stop crying. She has no idea where she went either. For her, it's as if she disappeared from the party 2 days ago and just reappeared back at home. Greg brings up the camera. They need to meet up and talk, but it has to be tomorrow. The police are at Sherry's for questioning. 2 hours. Did ripping up the photos cause Sherry to reappear? That means the camera caused her to disappear. Why stop there? Do you think tearing up the photo of Dad's car would fix it? Why is this photo a special case? You know what, let's not get into the logistics of however this works. So, Sherry meets Greg at the playground the next day with a sense of fatigue. She was hounded about her disappearance by the police and her parents for so long, she's practically apathetic at this point. Greg shows her that photo of them from yesterday, and the prediction occurs as Spidey's shadowy figure looms above them. You won't believe it. Greg realizes that the photo came true! The kids run away, but Spidey's too fast. He's about to catch up to the kids, but the honk of a nearby car grabs their attention. One of Greg's neighbors, Jerry Norman, threatens Spidey in the whitest way you can think. I'm calling the cops, mister. This makes Spidey immediately run and hide. Jerry offers to call the police for them, but they don't need it. Greg tells Sherry that Spidey must want the camera back really bad, so they need to return it. Tomorrow. They arrive at the house the next day, and what better set dressing is there than a thunderstorm rolling in? They both check the basement windows, but Spidey's nowhere to be seen. They decide to walk in, and a loud crash comes from behind them. It was just the door slamming from the wind. Storm's really coming on. Maybe they should have waited one more day. They make it to the landing by the basement, and Sherry asks why they can't just leave it there and leave. Greg's paranoid thoughts convince Sherry to keep going. He must think Spidey is so stupid that he wouldn't be able to find the camera unless it's back in the secret door. The house is making plenty of noise from the current storm, and they quickly make it down at the basement. Greg easily opens the secret door again and everything just fine. As they head back upstairs though, Spidey's blocking the doorway. Spidey advances towards them slowly, initially not bothering to speak. With the flashes of lightning, they can tell that he's pretty old, with beady eyes and a small mouth. The kids mention that they brought the camera back, so he says he'll check. Spidey's taken aback a bit when Greg says he took a few pictures with it. I mean, it's a camera, dude. What the hell else what's he gonna do with it for a few days? He tells the kids to sit down, and thus starts this book's exposition dump. Spidey's real name is Dr. Fritz Fredericks. He used to be a scientist, and his lab partner created the evil camera. It wasn't always evil, though. It would have made his partner a fortune, somehow, but Spidey stole it. He admits to being a greedy and evil man when he was younger. Apparently his lab partner was a lot more evil than him, though. Perhaps his lab partner was Master Caecilius, because he was a master of the dark arts. Spidey mentions the belief that some primitive cultures thought cameras could steal your soul into the photos. Well, guess what? This camera does do that. Spidey's lab partner cursed the camera as revenge for it being stolen, and it has pretty much ruined the entirety of Spidey's life. It killed his family, lost him his job, and it can't even be destroyed. So Spidey vowed to keep the camera secret and hidden so that no one could ever use it again. Well, that didn't work out too well, huh? Greg and Sherry are relieved they returned the camera, but they aren't allowed to leave. They know too much. Spidey snatches the camera and grabs a hold of Greg. Sherry takes this chance to run forward and grab the camera from him back. She goes to take a photo of Spidey, but he yells out and begins a fight with Sherry. They both wrestle for the camera until a flash of light brightens the room. Before we can see what happened, Sherry tells Greg to run. They bolt up the stairs, camera in hand, still unsure of whose photo was taken. Spidey's screams echo from the basement until they suddenly stop, and they realize he's not chasing them. They slowly make their way back to the basement as Spidey's body is lying on the ground. He's dead. How did that happen? The fright of being shot on the evil camera must have killed him. The developed photo proves it as well. First order of business is to put the camera back, and then maybe call the police. 2 days later, the whole group of friends stares up at the Kaufman house to reflect. The police said that he died of heart failure, but they know the truth. What truth? Yeah, it wasn't heart failure, but a heart attack. Big whoop. The group rides off on their bikes, glad to be out of this creepy business, and everything's fine. Except 2 people come out of the Kaufman house's back door. It's those 2 bullies. They were watching the kids in the basement the other day and got their hands on the camera. Mickey takes Josh's photo, and what could possibly develop? Let me start by saying I really did love this book. I think there's a nice cast of characters, even though Greg is clearly the focus, and the camera itself is both scary and entertaining. The only issues for me, which you could clearly tell, was repetition. There's only so many times the reveal of a new photo or the outcome of one can be the chapter-ending cliffhanger before it gives you some fatigue. With 2 more sequels, I wonder how much they'll rely on that, too. The camera's effects seem random, which is both confusing, but also surprisingly keeps it fresh. It takes multiple photos of physical injury that can't be reversed, but it also banished Sherry into disappearing until her photo was ripped. I wonder what ripping all of those photos could do. Bring Spidey back from the dead? The camera is such an amazing concept, and it came to my attention that it has to be based on this Twilight Zone episode, A Most Unusual Camera. I feel like I have to, so let me just give a lightning-fast summary of that episode right here. So, in this episode, a group of crooks steal a bunch of useless junk, especially this weird camera with a message in French that they can't understand. When they decide to use it for fun, they learn it can actually take photos of what will happen around 5 minutes into the future. They use this ability to cheat at horse races, betting for huge money. When the French waiter appears where they're staying, he reads the message on the camera, 10 to an owner. They all assume that this means that they're only allowed to take 10 photos total, and the group's taken 8 already, so the paranoia of being betrayed starts a fight where they take an accidental photo of Paula screaming. The fight continues and the picture comes true as both men fall out the window. As a petty crook though, Paula doesn't care very much. She jokes around and takes a photo of the men outside before going back to collect the money. The French waiter comes back, realizing that the entire group was wanted criminals, so he wants to steal the money for himself. The photo Paula took earlier finally develops, and they notice that more than 2 bodies are outside. When Paula goes to check if this is true, she trips on a cord and falls out the window. The waiter's really happy, until he looks at the photo and notices there's 4 bodies in it, and he falls out of the window as well. That was a very succinct summary of that episode. I'm sure that others have delved into detail with it before, but the inspiration for the evil camera is clear. The camera doesn't seem to be able to be abused for wealth in the book, but it does predict a future where calamity occurs. It doesn't have a limit, and the presence of an evil curse means the camera likely causes what happens, somehow. I didn't actually know about the Twilight Zone episode before making this video, but it's so clear now. Even though it isn't original, the concept is still amazing. One last thing I want to mention before the episode is those splat stats, the bonus features I mentioned in the Monster Blood video. They give the camera an evil stat of 10. That must be one powerful curse. I could chalk up the strength and attack skills as its ability to hurt people, but speed and intelligence? It can't even be used or moved on its own. How could it have any of those? I don't even know if Stein decides these. On to the episode. So, most of you watching probably know this already, but the most famous thing about this episode is that yes, Mr. I Drive Ryan Gosling is playing Greg. This is one of his earliest acting roles, but he was even in an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark a few months prior. Please let me know below if you think I should cover those as well. I'm not as well versed in those as I am with Goosebumps, but I'd love to branch out into similar media. So the episode immediately starts with the group scoping out Spidey's hideout, which doesn't seem to be the Kaufman house, but just some random factory. And they watch Spidey hop away. They talk about all sorts of rumors on Spidey, like him meeting rats, or cats, or bats. Greg is frightened pretty easily, but not nearly as hesitant like the book. You might also notice that Michael is nowhere to be seen. I guess he's not relevant enough to include. The basement's huge, and Ryan Gregling accidentally bumps into the clamp this time, easily opening the secret door. The camera is given this hilariously goofy design, like an alien spaceship mixed with a superhero helmet. Sherry says it looks like a toaster, though. I guess? Somehow Greg looks at this thing and immediately assumes that it's a camera, and Bird wants his photo taken. Bird takes the spot of Michael here, managing to fall off of the stairs right as it's taken. Luckily for Bird, though, there's a bunch of cardboard to break its fall. They mention how could anyone live here, but it seems really spacious. He even has a TV in this version, too. They go to leave and actually run into Spidey this time. Maybe there's no other staircase anymore. Spidey has these steampunk goggles on this time, but before he can catch them... So the group manages to barely escape with all these Dutch angles, and Greg looks at the developed photo. Bird's gaslighting him into thinking he took the photo during the fall, but who cares? Greg's feeling up Dad's new car as Terry comes outside. Now, I wrote in the script here that I had no idea what this car was, but after writing this, I figured out that it was a Ford Taurus. But not a 1992 Ford Taurus navy blue station wagon, just a regular one. Maybe from 1995. I don't know. Terry comes up and calls Greg a troll. Cool new insult. He asks about the camera, and Greg gives the Sherry gave it to me excuse. Terry wants his photo taken, but Greg sees what's on it and can't show it to him. I guess Terry's just leaving in Dad's car here, and Spidey's already stalking around. Well, at least Terry's fine, but the car's destroyed. We actually get near verbatim the joke of Terry mistaking the veal for chicken at dinner. Weird touch. Greg actually says Dad should just take the car back.
Think how bad you would feel if you got a scratch on it. And besides, it's too shiny. It hurts my eyes.
You're so weird, Greg. Let's take the car out for a spin. Greg's freaking out just like the book, but Dad's only going 35 this time. On the highway? He actually tries to show Mom the photo, but it flies out of the car. We get the close call with the truck as well, but it seems to be entirely the truck driver's fault. That brief nightmare about the skeleton barbecue is played out as a whole scene this time, and Terry is just chomping down on some corn. The skeleton photo is actually pretty creepy this time too. So we cut ahead a little bit, and Bird has a real talent for juggling in this episode. Multiple things start happening in this scene where Bird denies the camera's ability.
If you're serious, then I'll make a prediction. Tomorrow, men in white coats are gonna come and take you away.
Greg and Bird try and pry the camera open, which Sherry was there for in the book. Mickey and Joey, the two bullies, also show up really early, and the two guys run away into Sherry's yard. This, coincidentally, is a perfect segue to the point where Sherry gets her picture taken by the tree, and her birthday along with her parents are completely removed from the episode. Oh, by God, here comes another plot point. Terry shows up in Sherry's yard, somehow, to announce that Dad's car is totaled. I have to assume just from this scene that the playground with the baseball field has got to be removed, as most of these events took place there, and the photo of Bird in the Family Guy death pose is gone. The police show up right after the hospital visit, and they might be the scariest part of this episode.
Do you know Sherry Walker? When's the last time you saw her?
At her house, I guess.
No, she's not. She's missing. Disappeared. What do you mean you knew it?
Are
you telling us the truth?
This is a picture of a tree.
The male officer was actually played by Scott Speedman. Small world we live in, huh? So Greg's discussing the camera with Bird again and starts to crash out, ripping up that photo of Sherry and throwing the camera onto the ground. Bird notices the camera isn't even scratched, a nice hint to it being indestructible. He also thinks Spidey probably kidnapped Sherry because he wants the camera back so bad. But he's definitely not going to help Greg give it back. Bird's got to go do stuff with his dad. A lot of stuff. So Greg shows up to Spidey's place at night, and Sherry just appears with this cheesy smile. I swear to God, her voice this entire episode has been dubbed over horribly. Just look at this.
It's so unreal. All of a sudden, I was back in my backyard. I don't even know where I was.
Spidey starts giving his speech from the book a bit too close to the screen this time. He actually says that he was the sole inventor of the camera, and he just discovered its supernatural abilities. No curse, no partner, no name drop, nothing. Still indestructible, though. Spidey tries to fight Greg like the book, but Ryan Gosling is so strong he just pushes Spidey off this time, and Sherry immediately chooses to take his photo. Instead of a heart attack, he just disappears, and now he's stuck inside of the camera. They didn't even put it back in the secret door, they just leave. Just like the end of the book, the bullies actually find the camera and take a photo, which frees Spidey from the camera. Well, hey, that episode was actually kind of good. It's pretty accurate, too. The big standouts for what changed are the ending monologue and fate of Spidey, along with all of the Michael and Bird content that was removed. Also, that little dog, that Cocker Spaniel from the very beginning that never showed up past Chapter 2. An important change there. Bird is pretty much nothing in the episode. He doesn't joke around, his Little League photos cut, his appearance is pretty normal, so where does that nickname even come from? I also love that they expanded on the skeleton barbecue nightmare too. Great touch. In any case, this Ryan Gosling kid is pretty good. Maybe he should try acting some more. Unfortunately, I guess he just wasn't good enough to return in the sequel episode, but that'll be a whopping 40 books from now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that story. Did you learn anything new? I plan on releasing these every 2 weeks, so if you're as excited for the next one as I am, please subscribe to keep up to date. Have a beautiful day, everyone, and prepare yourself for the next book, Curse of the Mummy's Tomb.